Welcome back to another edition of the Magic Latest Podcast, the podcast where we discuss everything Orlando Magic basketball. I'm your host, Jalon Dixon, and today we're going to be reacting to the Orlando Magic beating the Portland Trail Blazers 110 to 106. But before we get into that, remember to like, comment, and subscribe for daily Orlando Magic content. We are on the road to 1,000 subscribers and try to become one of the biggest Orlando Magic podcasts here on the YouTube platform. So remember to hit that post notification bell so you always know when we're dropping new videos. And let's go ahead and get right into it. And this was a two-way masterclass by Desmond Bane. Don't get it twisted. The end score makes this game look a lot worse than it actually was. But overall, very proud of the performance of Desmond Bane leading the charge with 23 points, 4 rebounds, 5 assists, but 3 steals and 3 blocks. The most amongst any player in this game, both blocks or steals. And particularly showed up big time in the final 2 or 3 possessions, offensive possessions for the Portland Trail Blazers on defense, that being Desmond Bane. Big game across the board for an Orlando Magic team that just needed to keep themselves above water. I mentioned last episode that this was a time frame in which the Orlando Magic are teeter-tottering, not just because of the spiraling injuries, but also because the schedule has not been very favorable to them within the last week and a half. This was their third game in 4 nights on what was essentially a Western Conference road trip. And this was a game that, especially with yet another late rally, if you guys remember, that first Portland Trailblazers game was very similar. The Trailblazers were a team that, although it felt like things were kind of out of their favor in the beginning, in that back of the half of the third quarter into the fourth quarter, they rallied back, and that's what eventually led things to being pushed to need that game winner by Desmond Bane earlier on in the season. Now, the same thing could have happened to the Orlando Magic, and with lesser talent in this circumstance because they're missing Franz, Jalen Suggs, Tristan da Silva. They also did not have Goga Batadze in this game as well. So they could have folded under the pressure of this team pushing back as they did in their earlier matchup and actually been on the wrong end of the game in ways that they were very close to earlier on in the year. But this team showed up defensively. I think that one of the biggest things that was important is in that first half, they were able to kind of keep things in front of them. And I think the most important thing was it never really felt like, outside of Deni Avdija and maybe some pick and roll actions here and there that involved, Donovan Clingan, that it never really felt like Portland was killing them in any way. Now, the part that, of course, is the scariest takeaway for me from this Orlando Magic game is that the one thing the Orlando Magic do the best at, they struggled or the one thing they do the best at, they thrived in. The thing they did the worst at was what nearly cost them this game. From beyond the arc, the Portland Trail Blazers only shot 9 of 32. That equated to 28%. The Orlando Magic are a top 8 team in the NBA as far as guarding the three-point line, as far as volume and efficiency is concerned. Here's one of the things that they've struggled with, but have had some momentum, but struggled with in the past few games. They lost the points in the paint battle 36 to 58, and particularly 28 points out in the fast break in transition in favor of Portland, as opposed to the Magic, who only had 13 fast break points. Now, where they made up for that was points off turnovers, 22 to 14. I'm very worried about the Orlando Magic internal defense as far as rim protection is concerned, because I saw too many possessions where it felt like if guys were able to get 2 feet into the paint, they were dunking the ball or laying the ball up over Wendell Carter Jr.'s head, over Jonathan Isaac's head. And I worry about that. Now, again, you can make the argument that starts with the point of attack defense, or lack thereof right now, because their ability to get to the rim practically unchallenged, or able to create so many of these fast break opportunities, is part of the issue, right? If you're able to continuously get a full head of steam because you're not truly being challenged at the top of the key, it puts you in a position where, as the defender, you're going to stand there and either get posterized or you are going to be staring at a charge, more than likely. Which, let's be honest, right? There's only a handful of people in this league that are built to just start taking charges. Let's be real, right? Excuse me. So, and even worse would be to step in front and take a blocking foul, and now you just got your body pummeled into just to end up awarding 2 free throws. But one of the biggest things that got the Portland Trailblazers back into this game was simply their ability to operate on the offensive glass, where they got 11 offensive rebounds. The Orlando Magic were able to compete with that as well, 10. But I think the points in the paint aspect and the Portland Trailblazers' ability to play in transition so much helped speed this tempo up in a way that I think the Orlando Magic just could not match. Because, see, the Orlando Magic, outside of a few things here and there, like, for example, starting Tyus Jones, the Orlando Magic are relying very heavily on their size element right now to keep them afloat. Paolo Banchero, Wendell Carter Jr., Anthony Black, Noah Pinda, Jonathan Isaac. I just named 5 players that played in this game that are all, 6'8" or above, or about 6'8" or above. And of course, that naturally is the way the Orlando Magic are built roster-wise, but they've never truly leaned into the fact that they're bigger as far as offense is concerned, right? Even prior to this year, where they were putting so much emphasis on the idea of playing faster, it wasn't like the Orlando Magic were playing a physical brand of basketball in the half court as far as posting guys up and doing things of that nature. It was always kind of built off of this idea of trying to get downhill, trying to use the aggression as opposed to the size leverage. In this Portland Trailblazers matchup, you could not simply lean on the size because you've got Donovan Clingan. Denny Avdija at 6'8" is their point guard. Shaden Sharp, shooting guard. Chris Murray, Tamani Kamara. Their wing depth is built to go toe-to-toe with a team like the Orlando Magic if we're talking strictly size is concerned. Now the question is, which team is better built to be able to play that up-tempo style? And unfortunately, this is where the separator between a guy like Denny Avdija and someone like Tyus Jones, or even if Jalen Suggs were healthy for that matter, Denny Avdija is better built to run an offense that is meant to be in the top 5, top 8 in pace of play. He's been that way since he was drafted, even dating back to his time with the Washington Wizards, that playing this up-tempo style, having the ball in his hands, being downhill, creating, these fast break opportunities, creating these transition opportunities just simply by getting the ball off the inbound and pushing the ball up court as quickly as humanly possible while being above average, if not, I wouldn't say elite's a little high, but let's say above average passer at the point guard position, I think is one of those things that made it where the Orlando Magic could not compete in the same way that they are able to do with some of these other teams. Because not only did the Portland Trailblazers have the size to compete with the Orlando Magic, but now they have the size and are able to go toe-to-toe in that pace area. And the difference maker in this one, again, was for the Orlando Magic hitting their threes, the Blazers were able to get to the paint at will. And that is something that I think the Orlando Magic are going to have to really worry about or really put more emphasis on. Because it's not going to be too many nights that you have 3 guys knock down 4 threes. Tyus Jones easily had his best game as a Magic in this one. 16 points, 4 rebounds, 7 assists, and was a +7, which was tied for the second best on the floor. I love Tyus. If anybody who's been an avid follower of the podcast knows that I love Tyus Jones, but I don't know how consistent this is going to be. So if you get a typical Tyus Jones game as far as his Orlando Magic tenure so far, if you get what was once upon a time considered a typical Tyus Jones game, you probably lose this. You probably lose this game. And that's the simple equalizer there, is that this team is going to have to just get lucky. This team is going to have to get some games where a guy or 2 guys that are not normally on one play out of their body. Now, thankfully, there's only but so much more time before the troops should be able to rally back. Talking about Franz, Jalon, Tristan Da Silva, Mo Wagner. Hopefully, Goga Bataz is kind of just being medically what's it called? What's it called? I guess you could say they're being medically cautious with this knee strain, right? Hopefully that's the case. Um, but yeah, this is one of those games where again, even with Desmond Bain, 3 steals and 3 blocks is. I mean, of course, if Desmond Bain was averaging that, he'd be a bona fide All Star every single season. Ridiculous, right? Anybody would. He had to have an out of body performance on the defensive end to help really contribute to an Orlando Magic team that kind of needed every ounce of energy he gave on both sides of the floor. So yeah, I think that this Portland Trailblazers team pushed the Orlando Magic in a real way, and the Magic could have easily lost this one towards the back end. But I think again, the separator in all of this is just the fact that they were able to have somebody in Tyus show up in a game where they really needed to help stop the bleeding. Desmond Bain shows up big on the offensive and defensive end. Paulo Banchero, didn't even mention him too much. 12 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, only 8 shots. Did not knock down his first field goal until a couple of minutes into the second quarter, if I'm not mistaken. Or he went a significant stretch without having a field goal going into the second quarter. Um, but again, I think that's part of it too. I think Paulo Banchero understands that there's going to have to be other guys. Now, I do think there's a certain level of aggression he needs to have in 8 shots where you are the lowest of any player in shot attempts out of your first 6 guys in the rotation, right? Noah Penda took more shots than you. Tyus Jones took more shots than you. And then, of course, Wendell Carter Jr., Desmond Bain, and Anthony Black all took more shots. So you do worry about that, especially when Paulo plays 36 minutes, because it's not like Paulo was like crashing the glass, getting a double-double, and he only had 3 assists in this one. So the passivity of Paulo Banchero paired with the point of attack defense / rim protection, that's the chicken or the egg conversation, is something that the Orlando Magic are going to have to really address, especially over the next, week or two that they still have to survive without Franz and those guys coming back. Let's talk about Anthony Black for a second. This will be very brief, but I did want to shout this out. Anthony Black had a very strong game, 22.7 rebounds, 6 assists, and was 8 of 21 from the field, but did knock down 4 3-pointers. Even though he was a -3 on the floor, his contributions were felt, and I think that it's not spoken about enough how well he has played over the last 4 games, dating back to this team coming back off of the NBA Cup quarterfinal game. Anthony Black has had 20 or more points in 3 of the last 4 games. The only game that he did not eclipse the 20-point mark, he had 19. Anthony Black has answered the bell as far as needing to be that other tertiary ball handler on the wing in place of Franz Wagner to be able to create offense and be assertive enough to seek out offense next to Desmond Bain and Paulo Banchero. I think that that's been a really good observation, or I think that's been a very good outcome of this season and of the Franz Wagner injury in general, is that the emergence of Anthony Black as a more assertive scorer has been a godsend, because they're going to need that. When this team gets fully healthy and the lineup goes back to Jalen Suggs, Desmond Bain, Franz Wagner, Paulo Banchero, and then you have Wendell Carter Jr. at the center spot, and you get that bench fully back healthy where Anthony Black is at the helm at the front of that. You get Mo Wagner back. You get Tristan Da Silva back. You get Goga Batazde back, and then you're able to run one of either Tyus Jones or Jace Richardson or Jet Howard next to Anthony Black in that backcourt. When this team gets back whole with what Black has been able to do offensively, no matter if he's been coming off the bench, starting at the point guard position, starting at the shooting guard position, or even starting at small forward this season, he has been aggressive in hunting out his shot and been aggressive at trying to make sure he is a threat offensively on every possession. And I enjoy watching Anthony Black play basketball this season because it has been a big help to see his development. One of the biggest conversations we had during the offseason when we were talking about some of the conversations this team was having in training camp was that Jamal Mosley wanted to empower guys like Black and Tristan Da Silva to be more aggressive on both sides of the ball. And I think that Anthony Black has truly not only taken that to heed, but I think he's put it in motion in a way that should be praised. I'm loving what Anthony Black is doing right now. Again, I've said it a million times on the podcast, and I'll probably say it a million more times. He's probably not going to be in the conversation for most improved player. But if there was a most improved player All NBA team, the way there is a All NBA defensive team, and there's an All NBA team that goes 3 teams deep for the top 15 players in the NBA. If there was a most improved players All NBA team, Anthony Black would be easily etched into either the back portion of first team, or he would be at the forefront of All NBA most improved second team. He has been absolutely wonderful for this team, especially when you factor in the inconsistencies across the roster due to these injuries. So I just wanted to shout him out real quick. Next up, Paulo Banchero. I saw something that I thought was pretty interesting where the Athletic spoke with Paulo Banchero during this 4-game road trip, and they asked him about some of the naysayers that have spoken on the idea that the pairing of him and Franz Wagner doesn't work. And he said, I think that's BS. I'm not going to lie. People are going to say whatever they want to say about me, Franz, and whoever. But we know that we are at our strongest when both of us are out here on the floor. People say that the ball moves more when only one of us is out there. I don't think that's true, honestly. I think sometimes you beat teams or play certain teams, certain games, and make it look that way. But if you really watch and analyze, we play the same way every game. Nothing changes when somebody is out. We play the same way, especially on offense. Nothing really changes. I don't buy too much into that perception, but it is frustrating to see that and hear that just because, like I said, we're at our best when both of us are out here. Now, there were a couple of statistics that were provided by the Athletic to kind of help push this narrative along. Not necessarily the narrative that they don't work, but push together the narrative that these two have an interesting dynamic when they are on the floor together. It says the two stars' offensive games are similar, perhaps too similar. Banchero and Wagner are at their best with their basketball in their hands, attacking the basket on mismatches or drawing so much defensive attention that they spray the ball out to the perimeter. Banchero and Wagner also have the same key weakness, their shooting. Banchero is a career 31.4% three-point shooter, and Wagner, despite an uptick this season, is a career 32.5% three-point shooter. Banchero and Wagner have played a total of 286 minutes together this season, and when the Magic deploy that two-man lineup, the Magic have outscored opponents by 4 points per 100 possessions. That's good, but it's not the overwhelming impact typically expected from two players locked in on maximum salary deals. Banchero, 5 years, $241 million contract extension, will begin with the 2026-27 season and will balloon to approximately $287 million over 5 years if he makes an All-NBA team this season. Wagner is in the first year of a 5-year, $224 million contract. The counter-argument is that Banchero and Wagner are young, still developing players who have not yet hit their primes. Banchero turned 23 in November, while Wagner turned 24 in August. With more experience and crucially better outside shooting, that could come in time. Banchero and Wagner should have the opportunity to silence their doubters in a way similar to how the Boston Celtics' Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown eventually overcame the doubts about their pairing together. At this exact moment, though the Banchero-Wagner pairing is not an immediate concern, Wagner suffered a high ankle sprain on December 7th, and his return is not imminent. Now, there's much more to this article. You guys can feel free to read it yourself. But I think that something I just want to touch on simply is the back portion of that, which said that with time and further experience, they could get to the point of silencing the doubters, similar to the Boston Celtics, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown pairing. I've always said that this team is built in the mirror image of that championship Boston Celtics team. For those who are not familiar with the analogy that I've made a million times on this podcast, mainly during the off season, I have said that the Orlando Magic, whether they did it on purpose or not, has positioned themselves to look just like that Boston Celtics team. Paolo Banchero, your star franchise player. Jason Tatum, your secondary wing option ball handler that does things a little differently, but a little bit the same as Paolo Banchero. Just does it in a flavor that looks a little different, even though it's meant to try to equate to the same result. Jaylen Brown. Tertiary option who can be a knockdown three-point shooter, also can be a big-time defender on the perimeter and be somebody that you can trust at the point of attack. For the Boston Celtics, in some situations that was Drew Holiday as far as the third option. In most instances, he fits more of that point of attack defensive player at the point guard position. That would be Jalen Suggs, which many would say that Jalen Suggs has grown into becoming this next generation's Drew Holiday as a point of attack defender. People have already made that comparison. Desmond Bane now as your acquisition is basically supposed to be an upgraded version of what the Boston Celtics got from Derek White. Derek White is probably a better defender than Desmond Bane, but Desmond Bane is much more consistent at being able to get to the rim. Derek White might be on par with Desmond Bane as a three-point shooter, but Desmond Bane's ability to create offense off the dribble is what separates him as an offensive player. So you can make an argument that those guys are maybe a little even just because of the fact that Derek White has the defensive edge. But nonetheless, the archetype of what Desmond Bane is essentially to match that of what Derek White brought to the table when he got to the Celtics. And then at the center position, you have Wendell Carter Jr., a.k.a. Al Horford. Not only is Wendell Carter Jr. of that starting five the longest tenured Orlando Magic of the group, or one of the longest tenured Orlando Magic players on the team, guess who he was compared to in his draft analysis comparison when he was initially drafted out of Duke? Al Horford. So now, Jalen Suggs, Drew Holiday, Desmond Bane, Derek White, Franz Wagner, Jaylen Brown, Paolo Banchero, Jason Tatum, Wendell Carter Jr., Al Horford. This team is trying to build its image out. Even if it's not on purpose, it mimics, it reflects similar to that team. If you're one of those people that have trepidations, you have fear that this pairing is not going to work, look how long it took that Celtics team to win a championship, even being as talented as they are. Being talented as they had been. There was a version of this team that had Kyrie Irving and Gordon Hayward. There was a version of this team that had Isaiah Thomas. There was a version of this team that had a DPOY version of Marcus Smart. Right? They had made the Eastern Conference Finals so many times. This Boston Celtics team made the Eastern Conference Finals so many times. People started mistaking Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown for being older than they actually were. But they eventually got over the hump. They brought in Drew Holiday. They brought back Al Horford, who took a little stint over in Philadelphia. They brought in Kristaps Porzingis. They bring in Derek White from the San Antonio Spurs. Right? And they made it work. Now, for Orlando Magic fans, you hope that it doesn't take as long as the Boston Celtics took to do it, but look how consistent they were. Look how good they were. Look how consistently good they were before they finally got over that mountaintop. It's not the pairing not working that's the issue. The problem is the reps. The problem is seeing the live fire. The problem is that this team now needs to learn what the identity is under the fire of also having real postseason expectations. For anybody who's worried about the pairing between Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner, I'll tell you this much. This team is going to make the playoffs this year. This team's going to make the playoffs this year. This team's going to make the second round. They're going to push a team to 6 games, maybe even 7 games. And we're going to learn a lot about that pairing. Because in game 7, in game 6 or 7 against some team in the second round, we're going to learn what those two are made of. It's going to be a defining moment. And it's going to be the validation for those who fear that this pairing doesn't work, or validation for those who believe that this pairing is how this team is going to eventually win a championship. Should this season have as much weight as that sounds? No. But the reality of the situation is that Paolo Banchero's contract extension kicks in next season. And Franz will now be entering his second season on his max extension at that point. Once that price tag balloons up, the decisions around this team become that much more serious. So they will learn in this postseason just how well these two do or do not work together now, with the backdrop that not only are they going to make the playoffs, they're supposed to make the playoffs. See, last year, many would have been okay with even writing the Magic off in terms of not making the playoffs, just simply due to the injury circumstances. This version of this team, I'm not sure if they have the same leeway. I'm not sure. But I believe that it's going to work out. I believe that even if they lose in that 6th game, in that 7th game in the second round, it's not going to be about the result that determines and decides whether or not the pairing works. Watch how the two play when the chips are on the table and there's a chance to be sent home, be eliminated, or to send the other team home and advance to the Eastern Conference Finals. The way those two play under that leverage situation is going to be the thing that sends the message. It's not going to be about the result. It's going to be about the way those two play. And I think it's going to work out. I think it's going to work out more than fine. Last but not least, we are going to continue the NBA trade deadline wish list series. And this time we are going to spice things up a bit. I've been calm. I've been trying to keep the names kind of low key because, we got a long time between now and February 5th, February 5th, the NBA trade deadline. Very long time. January 7th is when some more players become available for trade with their contract situations. The next player in this series, and you guys can go back to previous episodes if you want to check out the other 4 players that I've discussed. The next player in this series is Chicago Bulls guard Coby White. Coby White has been in conversations for being moved for the last season and a half, but this season has been like no other as far as trade conversations that may be leading to an actual move being made by the Bulls. The Mavericks are in on it. The Bucks are likely in on it, or should be in on it, given the fact that it sounds like they're trying to make one last-ditch effort to acquire some high upside talent to put next to Giannis Antetokounmpo when he comes back, to see if they can make a late push for the postseason. And of course, the Minnesota Timberwolves have been rumored to nearly every point guard that's on the market. Darius Garland, Colin Sexton, Coby White, James Harden, right? The Minnesota Timberwolves have been pretty much like in conversations with anybody that has a point guard that could be on the move. None of them have a relationship with the Chicago Bulls like the Orlando Magic do. And you can say that's for good or for bad. If you're a Bulls fan, you probably say for bad. You give up Wendell Carter Jr., you haven't had a really solid center since, outside of maybe Nikola Vucevic, who up until about a season ago was like okay at best, but wasn't necessarily his fringe all-star self the way he had been when he was with Orlando. The pick that you had that turns into Franz Wagner. Kind of wish you had Franz Wagner if you're the Chicago Bulls, right? There's been a handful of different Chicago Bulls players that have ended up in Orlando Magic uniforms as well. So if you're a Bulls fan, maybe you're not as excited about making another deal with the Magic. The same way I felt like certain Boston Celtics people look at the Brooklyn Nets and they're like, we should have a decent relationship. We've made more than enough transactions in the past. But as a Brooklyn Nets fan, you might not be as crazy about the idea of trading with the Boston Celtics after what you've experienced as a franchise, as an organization, right? But let's throw all the hypothetical animosities and things away and focus just simply on the fit and the assets aspect. Kobe White on this team could be an excellent six-man off the bench in ways that I think is very similar to the Malik Monk stuff that we talked about beforehand. We've talked about Malik Monk. We've talked about guys like Colin Sexton before. We've had a bunch of different conversations about these score-first, smaller point guards that just know how to create offense for themselves. And I think that the Orlando Magic, getting a guy like Kobe White would be the thing that puts them over the top. Now, what would you have to move off of as the Orlando Magic in order to be able to get Kobe White? You'd have to give up the 2031 first-round pick, more than likely. You'd probably have to give up, to make the money work, you'd probably have to give up Jonathan Isaac, Jace Richardson, and that first. Is that package better than some of the other ones that could be offered? Potentially. Because Milwaukee doesn't have a first-round pick valuable enough to give you an exchange. They don't even have control over their own first-round picks. Portland does. The Minnesota Timberwolves may have the draft capital to potentially sell you on a move that could land Kobe White, but what player do they separate from that they feel comfortable giving up? Is trading Rob Dillingham enough for the Chicago Bulls, given the fact that if they wanted a small score first point guard, they just keep Kobe White? And I guess you could say the same thing about Jace Richardson to a lesser degree, but at least Jace Richardson has been more productive in NBA minutes than Rob Dillingham has been. Again, small sample size, but nonetheless still true. You could also make the argument that potentially maybe 5 seasons away from now, maybe that Orlando Magic pick is very valuable, right? The team is already very expensive. There's a chance that things could happen down the line that positions them to have to shed salary and things of that nature, and maybe one of Paolo Banchero, Franz Wagner, Desmond Bane, Jalen Suggs, or some combination has to be moved just simply because maybe the team's not good enough to be paying that high of a tax bracket, being in the the second apron, pushing the luxury tax for a team that maybe tops out as like a team that maybe makes the Eastern Conference Finals 1 or 2 times during that time frame. These are all hypotheticals, right? Kobe White is a player that I feel like, again, matches what the Orlando Magic have always kind of needed on this team, but has had to get it in committee form through guys like Jet Howard and Jace Richardson, or I've had to get it through someone like Anthony Black, but now takes away from his responsibilities on defense because he's putting so much more emphasis on scoring the ball. I'd much rather on the backcourt have a tandem of Anthony Black and Kobe White off the bench in that backcourt, along with Tristan da Silva, Goga Batista, and Mo Wagner, or Mo Wagner and Jonathan Isaac. Well, in this case, you wouldn't have Jonathan Isaac if you had to trade him just for salary purposes. I'd much rather have that. As much as I love Jace, as much as Jet Howard is growing on me this season, That is a very significant upgrade. Is it doable? I'm not sure. Do the Orlando Magic have the best package for him out of the teams, that are in conversation to try to acquire him? They're closer than most, at least for the teams that are in conversation that want him. The Mavericks, the Bucks, the Timberwolves. I think that the Magic are at least the closest as far as they have a very distant future first round pick that could be valuable, and they have a handful of young players that are valuable as far as being former first rounders and things of that nature. I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say in the comment section about this one. This was my first time that I took a real heavy swing on a player that I think is going to be an interesting wish list player, because out of all the players that I've discussed so far, I think Kobe White's the least likely for the Orlando Magic to acquire, but I think he might be the best of the five that I've discussed so far. So you guys let me know in the comment section down below how you guys feel about that. I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say about the idea of Kobe White maybe being an Orlando Magic player at some point. But with all that being said, this has been another edition of the Magic Latest Podcast. Again, remember to like, comment, subscribe, hit that post notification bell so you always know when we're dropping new videos. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace.